Yeah.
It was like the video in, was it also in the RIBOCA, the one where from the Green Bridge in Vilnius, there's this, what's the artist's name, but its most characteristic feature is he comes into the scene and does. Welcome to the recording of God's Air. We have today a very, I would say, fancy studio. First is Valts Miķelsons. Hello, Valts. Hi. Then we have Kirill Kobrin.
Hello. Fancy guest.
Thank you for joining us. Then we have Šelda Puķīte.
Hello.
And I am Indrek Grigor. So I guess we need to make a little round of kind of disclaimers. I'm officially kind of freelancer, but we are today talking about RIBOCA, the Riga Contemporary Art Biennial, and I'm like working for them in this sense that I'm participating on some events in the public program. So it must be said I'm getting paid by RIBOCA. It's the same with me. I have been doing some translations. So. Yeah, and actually you are kind of Suseum is you are kind of working for the
institution.
Yes, Suseum is the future home of the institution that I currently work for, the Muxel Art Salon. Although there is no curatorial link between the events. It serves as a venue, a fairly practical arrangement, I suppose.
They're giving the space, basically,
yeah.
And I don't know, the opening.
And they're getting some publicity from the fact. Okay. And Grill, which are your sins?
So actually, I'm freelancer. I have a sort of occupation. I am an editor of Moscow-based magazine Неприкосновенный запас, Emergency Ration, which is dedicated to social anthropology, politics, history, and whatnot, and so on. It's just on border between academic studies and sort of profound essayism and so on. But this has nothing to do with RIBOCA and so on. I'm trying to find out any connections, my connections to organizers of RIBOCA. Actually, they asked me to participate in public discussion, which will happen on 22nd of August. Mm-hmm. But it's free of charge. That's important. I was just interested to participate and I decided to do this. But very important notification: I'm not an art critic. All of you're just involved in art criticism and so on. I'm just historian and writer who is just from this point of view trying to write about art from time to time, and that's all.
Playing neutral here.
A sort of honest broker.
Yeah, interesting question in my case, because in the beginning of June I wrote a sort of short but kind of critical article about RIBOCA, which was not perceived well, but I don't know, closest to what you guys said is that I'm going to the RIBOCA reading groups. I'm trying to go to as much as possible to all of them, and their collaborators or kind of the partners, Contemporary Art Center, Latvian Contemporary Art Center is institutions that I'm collaborating a lot with, and so there could be my little how it's those what octopus has or links and webs
spider.
You can kind of through there kind of maybe find kind of some kind of traces which links me and RIBOCA together in one or something, because also those reading groups, they're originally something that Latvian Contemporary Art Center is doing already for years, and actually Valts has been also involved a lot in that, and so it's kind of, I'm actually continuing to go to to the event, which has already roots in Latvia. So it has been there before RIBOCA, and now it has become part of the educational program. So
I see.
And of course, Šelda is involved in another biennial in Riga, the Riga photography biennial. So she has like kind of, RIBOCA is the concurrent, so she's definitely like.
No, that's what social media kind of commentators kind of try to push this also agenda that I have.
They're trying to invent, sort of battle, struggle during the lazy summer.
No, there is this joke that also in Santa Hirscha article in Satori, she kind of played out this accusations, is that there has been in social media kind of references to Inga Lace, who made an interview in spring with Katarina Gregos, that she's a xenophobe. In my case, there was a comment about nationalist.
What nation? That's interesting. What nation you are supporting being nationalist?
I guess that means.
No, I don't know. Maybe, just Welsh people or...
Anyway, I guess the idea as such, which I guess that it's kind of that I'm anti-globalist, or I guess that was meant with that, or maybe even not that it's obligatory Latvian or whoever else nations, and then after Santa's article was published, she was labeled jealous.
But the point remains that RIBOCA is not nearly the first biennial in the Baltic states. So there are several going on right now as we speak. So in that sense,
and will be also in autumn, like Artichoke Biennial,
such
as one-off. So
okay, so we will get to them maybe also hopefully in the end when we manage to stay to the schedule. So, but let's start with the biennial. The biennials. Let's start with the biennial's reception, because as one of the critics, as Kirill already mentioned, we are the critics. Then we have been writing about biennial and have also followed the feedback for what has been written, which is not too common to get any feedback whatsoever about what has been written. So the biennial's reception is kind of weird. So it's very centered on the rumors surrounding the biennial. Because I would say there's a particular reason, for the 2 years preceding the biennial, I didn't hear anything else about the biennial other than the rumors. So it was there, and you could feel it also in the reception, because the Estonian critic Rebecca Põldsam, she wrote an article that was published on the very day that the biennial was opened, RIBOCA, and her article was solely about the rumors. Like there was not, it literally strived on the rumors and also argumented why the rumors are important. And Katarina Gregos wrote a rather impressive answer to that. So anyway, but another question is like how come I am very often attacked or accused by the biennial of not writing about the exhibition but writing about the biennial and about all the kind of troubles around it, that there is nothing else. And I have come up with the notion that it feels to me that how to say, the kind of the socio-political event that the biennial creates, that it's so big and so impressive and just lands here, it creates this situation where we finally see the need for art journalism. Where are the journalists? Like when we are talking about like some money coming from Russia, like suspicious. So where are the journalists who would actually deal with it? Because I feel that as an art critic, I lack the means or the knowledge or the I can't do that research. But suddenly I am put in this situation where I kind of should do it. So I'm also wondering, like, why do I feel myself suddenly in this situation, and also other critics, because Šelda has been accused of the same. That why don't you write about the exhibition? We really expected you to write about the exhibition, and you still write about the RIBOCA. So for me, the question is like, how come the critics now suddenly are all so interested in the institution rather than the exhibition? Whereas it actually doesn't happen, and not only in the art field but also in theater and so on, we see actually very little written like that kind of this, like when we see how politics and economy is reflected, then in the arts context that is much lesser reflected. So how come all the critics are suddenly now talking about the institution of RIBOCA? Is it only about the money? Is it only because it is so big and so expensive?
Well, I suppose there's the obvious thing that the optics of the whole thing are not particularly good. I mean, you have a pile of money coming from Russia, and I suppose, I mean, the first thing that I thought when I heard about RIBOCA was, no, I'm not entirely sure whether it was Uzbekistan or Kazakhstan which sent the president's daughter to be the cultural ambassador to UNESCO with a huge pile of money, and as such it is it has this a certain negative connotations. Although, if I try to bring the point further, if I'm looking at it as a private investment, then I mean, if they were to open a factory here for the same amount of money, I mean, would we still be talking about all of this?
I guess the factory would need 1 zero more, and then we might be talking about this.
It depends, what sort of, maybe to open a distillery. Good idea for, a daughter of the president of a Muslim country.
Well, we should not also, now we could kind of went from this question about art journalists and art critics and the function of both, and why suddenly art critics are doing art journalism instead of maybe classical art criticism, to money issue. And actually it has been talked about also in the context of our local private sponsors. It just has been with the years quite quieted away. If we remember when Purvish Prize was founded, it got also some nasty criticism and kind of interviews where constantly Jan Zuzans was asked about his business, and the also dark side of his business and something like that. So it actually wasn't so openly taken in the beginning, and museum was criticized for collaborating with him. So, and then with the years it kind of just quieted down.
Even Catholic Church never asked about the source of money, So you're trying, contemporary art trying to be, more saintly than Roman Pope. It sounds very strange and suspicious, I have to say. Yeah.
No, Catholic Church and Machiavellism and all that is.
Yeah. Okay. Protestant Church, whatever, Buddhist, churches and so on.
Catholic Church have connotations,
Well, now that you mentioned Protestantism, well, I was thinking that there seems to be quite a lot of suspicion towards private money and private initiative in contemporary art, and also there seems to be some sort of a preference for being poor and sort of not really making ends meet but still doing art. It somehow, in a very Protestant sense, has this connotation of being virtuous and almost spiritual and holy. And when someone comes with money, then you sort of look at them as some sort of evil invaders or whatever, as though it would be, as though to be prosperous in itself would somehow be wrong or sinful or criminal or whatever.
A sort of Francis of Assisi attitude, say. Yeah. So actually, I don't know. I know nothing about money, and shamefully, money know nothing about me. We have, sort of two-way relationships. Sort of ignorance. So I cannot say. I can say nothing about money and so on. But speaking seriously, I think there are several points. I'm trying to speak from the point of view of sort of historian and social observer, maybe, but not an art historian, especially because I'm not. Again and again, I'm not art historian. I'm not art critic. First of all, of course, it's a global problem with contemporary art, which doesn't have a sort of aesthetic dimension no more. Contemporary art is a social gesture. You can interpret, analyze, write about this, just using the terms of social, whatever, social involvement, social unrest, social whatnot, and so on. But aesthetic side of contemporary art is sort of side effect of it. We cannot write about contemporary art from the point of trying to find sort of eternal beauty or something like this, which, classical art critic and journalism, used to say and used to write from this point of view. That's why all this, rumors and scandals and so on about money and source of money and oh God, Russian money. Okay, so let's speak. Just imagine if that would be, Saudi money or just money from Colombia or money from Alaska or whatever. Doesn't matter what sort of money are they. We're speaking about I absolutely agree with you. We're speaking about the sort of social, political, economical, and in some sense cultural event, and we can discuss it only in this terms. But aesthetically, how could you imagine sort of classical description of art biennale? Now I see this piece of art. It means this means this and this and that. In this way.
There is some articles that are written like that.
And more to the point, I think the Biennial itself is fairly aesthetic. Someone who had the inclination could quite easily go and meditate on Erik Sapiļais for 2 hours and describe all the dots and textures.
It's not the best actually example.
Well, but
yeah.
Such as,
I would even actually maybe not. I see your point, Kirill, but I'm not sure I totally agree with you. In this sense, because we have been having here at home with Šelda long discussions about RIBOCA, because I like the exhibition and Šelda has good points not liking it. And this is actually the discussion is raised actually on the aesthetical basis of it. Because RIBOCA, the way how it is presented, it wants to be very political. It really wants. I have here a quote from Katarina Gregos. Šelda, do you have that quote?
Yes, about Putin.
Yeah, would you please read it? I'm very bad in reading quotes.
With Putin's assertive presence in the region, his nationalist and expansionist tendencies, and on the other hand, the presence of NATO bases in the Baltic region, whose countries are part of the EU, this part of the world is currently in the spotlight and caught in between shifting geopolitics and conflicting ideologies. These are all issues that are raised in the Biennial from both a regional but also a global perspective.
It's just advertisement.
Exactly. But my point is that Katarina is lying. Like, those things are not in the exhibition. It's not there. The exhibition, I would describe the RIBOCA exhibitions as kind of this, like a big collection of contemporary art. It's like a museum show. You have those nice, I would say, totally beautiful works. It's kind of like, for me, Joseph Beuys, for example, has long gone lost its political meaning. It's just beautiful art. You go and look at it as an aesthetic object. So I feel most of the works in RIBOCA, they don't touch on any current topics. Like we have the booth, the Brexit booth, but even that's like a souvenir shop somewhere behind the corner.
So let's say it touches on the current topics, but very vaguely or not at all on political topics.
There are political topics, but the political topics are kind of this post-Soviet condition, not even the condition, but more like, like how the jazz musicians couldn't get...
There is a word for it, it's tokenism. You sort of present something for the sake of presenting it, but you don't really go very deep. It's just, you could say that there is this video about I think they are Iraqi refugees filmed in Finnish countryside, playing this arduous journey of Finnish refugees during, I think it was the Second World War, crossing the border to Finland. So in that sense, okay, the refugees are literally there, but is it enough just to mention the topic to say that we get any new information or any added knowledge from that? I mean, it's sort of a nice nod, but is it anything more than that?
I'm very sorry, but it's just a different, I think, it's a very different way how to put a political dimension of this Biennale. I'm not so, I cannot say for all art objects and so on, but my impression was it's very political, but in some way. Mm-hmm. It's not about some hot topics like, refugees or this. I just hate all this, talks about, post-Soviet influences and the state of mind and public consciousness and the Soviet past. I think everyone just, fed up totally with this. The word Soviet, it should be excluded, from the discourse for 5 years or maybe for 10 years. It would be very good, and then to return to it from the very good, distance keeping and so on, and then without all the speculations and so on. But it's political because its main topic is the fate of modernity. Fate of modernity as a historical period in Western, I can put it in this way, civilization. We're still living in the end of a period of modernity. Mm-hmm. The period that started with Enlightenment and so on. And the fate of Enlightenment, of reason from the capital letter, and all this stuff and so on is just obvious in most of the objects. For instance, in this by a Faculty of Biology exhibition and so on. It's political, but it's more, I cannot say it's more profound or more deep or so on. It's just different. If you try to be political in a very just short and quick way, like one of the ways making sex is quickie, this term, yeah. The most popular way now to doing political art is making quickie. But it from time to time it's quite hot and so on. But it has the other side. For instance, remember this Polish curator Shindrek, yeah, who was who was doing documentary for 2 or 3 or 5, or I don't remember how many years, dedicated it to Greece crisis. It had been set in 2 places, for the Castle and Athens and so on. But when it came to the to the beginning of the documentary, all this Greece crisis was over. Everyone just totally forgot about, the Greece and the problems and the left government, and only the family name Varoufakis was still, somewhere in the air. And I can say you why, because his wife, that was an idea that she was a hero of Jarvis Coker's song, Common People. Do you remember? She came from Greece with the thirst for knowledge. She studied sculpture at St. Martin's College. I say, golden eye. And there was a rumors that was when she was young, and she was at St. Martin's College and so on. That was his future wife, and that was the only way how all this situation around Greece, very serious for the history of the European Union and so on, was about when this documentary curated by Shindrek started. It doesn't make sense.
But isn't Greece constantly in crisis?
Yeah, everyone. I'm in crisis constantly. Everyone is in crisis constantly. So what's the point? From the times of Plato and Aristotle, it's in crisis.
No, but some have more this kind of identity of crisis than others.
Okay. So more Platonian, yeah?
So Greece has branded accidentally or consciously itself as being this state that EU is constantly running to support or
Isn't it Italy now?
Yeah, but who doesn't remember that Greece now during Brexit and so on? No one. Trust me, no one remembers about Greece now. Everyone is speaking about Britain and and Italy, of course. And
that's why in RIBOCA is not Greece issues, but there's Brexit both.
Yeah, but it was just one, and it was not very smart.
No, it's a souvenir shop. It looks like, and it is a souvenir shop, for me at least.
No, but for me that's kind of the point, that the current issues aren't there, but I don't mind it though. I very much enjoy a classical museum show where you just go and look at the artwork. So it's kind of Šelda helped me with these Lithuanian artists who had woodcuts of the former KGB houses.
Yeah. Sorry, but
anyway, there's a work by one Lithuanian artist which has woodcuts, like very nice sculptures of the former KGB houses. I would say they are really beautiful. I mean, it's kind of
it's Indrek Puķīte.
So it's kind of I very much enjoyed the display. Beautiful work. It is in a way political, I don't deny, but it is in no way a current topic anymore. It's kind of this political. It is political, but it's some old thing, and it's a beautiful work, and I enjoy it. And then I walk on. So in this sense, I agree with you that the contemporary art is kind of maybe we kind of cannot have anymore this classical idea of what is beautiful. I like this aesthetics. I think it might be a bit difficult to write like that, but at the same time, I kind of enjoy all those works. So there is like it's like looking at Mondrian or looking at that. It's like it's the same.
That is a point in which I actually would disagree. I mean, purely on aesthetical grounds. If you go to, Kirill was saying that aesthetics is, well, okay, those are not the words, but the aesthetical side of contemporary art is pretty much dead.
I said that a side effect.
Okay,
the idea of beauty, of being beautiful, is a side effect. You can enjoy this piece of art, but that's not been intended that you first enjoy it. Second maybe.
But then I would look at someone like Daiga Grantini, who is going to be the Latvian representative next year, and who is also currently on show in two venues of the Baltic Triennale in Vilnius and Tallinn. Who is, I'm not sure if that's the way that she or the curators would talk about her art, but for me it's pretty much very aesthetical, and I sort of realized that it does sound wrong in the contemporary context to say that something is for you, or indeed in general, purely aesthetical, but
that's what I call beauty is embarrassing.
but
prohibited mostly.
But in that sense, I think that for me, RIBOCA doesn't go far enough in this aesthetical dimension. I mean, you could easily have an aesthetical biennial, but there are things out there that are more contemporary in this very aesthetical sense than RIBOCA is aiming for. And Baltic Triennale, I think, for me, goes further than RIBOCA does. I mean, in the way they use space, in the way in the aesthetics that they have chosen. And I think that is something fairly specific. I think when you visit RIBOCA, it's fairly conservative. I mean, not saying that it's not beautiful, of course, but
isn't that kind of RIBOCA's aim, that it wants to be political? That's what Gregor's actually saying. We make now this political, and I do totally agree with you actually that when we look at what is the it thing in contemporary art, then it goes more and more aesthetical. We have again big abstract compositions, like in galleries.
Meri Keesna.
Yeah, Meri Keesna, for example. But she isn't even there. We have even.
She just has a show in Kim right now, so
maybe that's not even close enough yet. It's kind of. I would say Maja Kursheva and Kim might be even more aesthetical, for that matter.
No, I think one of the clashes might also be that one is taking in consideration what we knew when it was not still opened, so expectations kind of just did not meet with what was in the end, and maybe, sometimes it also happens that because of that we also are much more critical towards what is this result, because first of all, from Katarina's reputation, I would have expected something more kind of politically sharper, because it's very soft. All the agenda, for me, the way how it is both represented and how the artworks are chosen, it's kind of very softened and kind of quieted down version of all those agendas, and for me, I agree that it sometimes is, and many times actually is irritating that now this refugee topic is hot for few already.
Now in Palermo, there are a lot of, it's just all about refugees, and they're actually very good. But what's the point?
But in there it actually fits because Palermo is also a very significant place for it. So actually the city very much speaks about it. But I'm afraid I will start to jump from one topic to another. Is that, for example, another thing besides that the topic for me was too much general and too softened, was also this aspect of promised aspect of also this dialogue with the place where it happens. When Manifesta is in Palermo, it actually perfectly fitted in the dialogue, especially what at that moment happened in Italy in politics. It kind of even accidentally made Manifesta's agenda even stronger because of all this closed down borders in June and all that. Then in Riga's case, it kind of I did not understand.
No, what's the hot topic to
I cannot connect with.
Tell me, please. Identity again and again. Identity, post-Soviet state of mind. What?
No, but that is all what we can talk about Riga, or we can talk about the place where it happens.
Yeah, not necessarily. I mean. Well, okay, there are two things.
Of course, it's our history, but
no,
it will be there anyway. But
if they go on and say that it somehow represents the Baltics and changes that are going on here, then I suppose there are two ways you could take that. Either the changes that I think many people here are concerned about are not represented there at all, or we simply don't have artists who are willing to work with that in any meaningful way, which. Well, knowing the local context could perfectly be the case that perhaps the curator might have wanted to make it more political, but there simply was no one who was going to go along. So we have a fairly sentimental film about I think it was someone who was deported to Siberia, and there was something about Latvian folk dance and all other fairly many other fairly safe things, but nothing really biting or something that would really, provoke someone towards anything. It was pretty safe. You could take your kids along, you could take your grandmother along, you can even take your...
Why not? Why not?
Maybe that's not the best...
there was nothing wrong with that.
Example that he made. But
okay.
I understood the idea.
Biennale is the only place where you can bring only your mistress. No wives, no grandparents, no children, and so on. Just secret friends and mistresses and so on. Yeah. Actually, the tone of our discussion and the tone of disappointment, reminds me a discussion in the British musical press when David Bowie recorded his first album after his Berlin trilogy and Scary Monsters, Let's Dance. Oh yeah, that was cutting edge of what this and political and whatnot and so, and now it's just a dance music. What a shame. People change. People change, and curators, they're people, yeah, and
really?
they used to change, and again and again. I consider this partly this Biennale as a political thing, but in absolutely different way as it had been stated by the curator, and in an absolutely different way what's been just awaited by the general public and specialists and whatnot and so on. I mean that the political subject, topic of this, I'm speaking about mostly about the part of the Biennial in former Faculty of Biology and the port. I'm not locally.
Andrei was there.
Yes. What it's all about? You know, we have a building which is a sort of former temple of reason, enlightenment, progress, and so on. It's dedicated to science. Science which was a cutting edge of this civilization for several centuries. And now it's abandoned. And they use the abandoned building trying to re-establish science as a sort of old age pensioner, you know, very sentimental and so on, very melancholic. It's all about longing about that period when science was cool, when reason was cool, when ratio was cool, and so on. We're living in different world. We're living in the world of the, you know, cheap emotions, you know, quick emotions. We live in the world of, you know, endless scandals and all these psychological sort of mini storms and so on. Of course, this is all about that. That was a period where we had a, you know, proper science. That was not, definitely, yeah, but we are nostalgic and melancholic. They're two different things, but anyway, we are melancholic about the times where, you know, science was science, when progress was progress, and so on. And that's why I think it's a very strong political message about this. We're living in the very end of modernity, and the zeitgeist of our time is melancholy. That's why I consider all the stuff, you know, I mean, in the former biology, Faculty of Biology and so on, as 100% Zibeldian. It's Zibeldian stuff. It's sort of rings of Saturn.
Reading the curator's statement of the Biennial, I certainly detected much melancholy there. I mean, also, I mean, the way that she presents change, it sort of is on the verge of saying that something bad is going to happen, and that there was some sort of happier time in the past. Although I'm not sure that's that is a way that quite a few people look at the present time. But for me personally, that's definitely not the most productive way to do that. For me, the problem with the Faculty of Biology and indeed most of the other venues is that most of them have hosted exhibitions before, and they bear traces of those other exhibitions.
And even the topics.
I mean, you could almost argue that RIBOCA has, I don't know, taken has made a sort of a brief overview of survival kit or something.
Because that also this acceleration and downshifting, this is many of the things are kind of, I could say, that was in survival kit 3.
Yeah.
That topic exploited is not exploited. How to say it correctly? Reused.
Recycled.
Utilized. No.
Again, sounds critical. Was in survival kit 5, for example, and no, randomly just saying numbers, that doesn't mean anything, but just to point out that and then also actually, although it was very soft and very neutral article from Vilnius Vation Our Territory about biology faculty, he still pointed there out also about RIX-C work since 90s in Riga and in Latvia, and boosting up all those questions which are connected with the technology and society and art and networking and all that linking together, and so actually I wonder, is it that kind of curator just did not care about it, or did not feel that you know, because
it's international,
yeah,
you know, it's not for
us.
Yes, not for you. I'm a newcomer. It was for me because I'm a newcomer. I don't remember, you know, all the things which were happening up there. So for me, that was a place of melancholy, a place where we are longing for this past, where everything was their places and so on, and when science was cool. And I don't remember the name of the artist who did this installation, made this installation, which looks like Stanley Kubrick's Odysseus 2001, with big large room with white walls, and there are images of the real science just on it. So you have to wear this white stuff on you and so on. But that was he was playing with the idea that when Stanley Kubrick actually shot this movie, that was cool, really. Yeah, that was sharpening edge of cutting edge of new aesthetics of endless progress, which was very sad and whatnot and so on. But anyway, we had this feeling that we are going further and further, and now we're stuck. We are just in the rings of Saturn. We're moving just round and round and round all the time, and that was my feelings, and that is actually my understanding of the whole Biennale. It's very local. I mean, in the sort of not in the Latvian or Baltic even sense. It's very local in the sense of in a way how Northern and Central Europe is now is thinking about itself and its own past and recent state. It's the subject, the topic of the lack of present. Present doesn't exist in some sense here. Only past and no future, of course. It's political, no?
I instead I would sort of like to go back to something that's been talked about quite a lot here. I mean, about the relationship with the local context. I mean, because you could quite easily imagine that we are, indeed, we are not the target of the Biennial, that the people who are here don't really matter. I mean, if you travel around various middle size or upcoming biennials, I mean, the stuff that you would see probably would be reasonably the same, and you would normally have some token links to the local context. And going there as a visitor, you probably would think that it is reasonably good that they are actually working with the local context, even though from the local perspective it might seem like just a very, very sort of superficial thing. And I'm sort of trying to imagine what it's like for someone coming here from a different context and walking around the venues. And I mean, the Biennial is produced very well. I mean, it would you would go there quite smoothly and just look at everything, and you would see this and that nod to the local region, and you would think that okay, I'm in Latvia, I'm not in Saudi Arabia or something. And I'm sort of wondering if there's much of the debate going on about the local context and locals being either jealous nationalist or unsatisfied or whatever, if it's really just very, very local.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks.
Can we continue?
Okay, pause. It's over Shelda's turn.
Yeah, no, but actually when we, July, with Indrek visited Manifesto in Palermo, actually talked about, and what was our surprise, and in the beginning it was this, talking just about this discomfort of the foreigner being in Palermo, but then kind of starting to see it as something very positive, is actually that you could feel, I don't know if you agree, who has been in Manifesto, that it felt much more for the locals than for the international crowd. And in some cases even the language was kind of that some things I think even were not translated, it was all in Italian or kind of...
She's in Sicilian.
Sicilian, yeah, sorry, Sicilian, yeah, I know, that's important. And most of the kind of farthest venue places, we even talked with the guides and consulted how we could get there, because that's the interesting part, that you can get out of the center and go to those interesting suburbs and even some 1 hour away from Palermo or something like that. And they're like, oh, it's kind of, they will have event in that and that time, and it will be in Italian, And kind of, but have you seen everything in the center? And we're like, yes. Oh, okay, great. and so that the focus kind of, maybe I'm wrong, but that's how I saw as foreigner coming to Palermo, that it kind of had such a strong focus actually on the locals, that it for me worked actually also as one that is excluded because of that. Mm-hmm. Felt actually as a very positive thing. I was kind of, oh yeah, okay, I will miss because of that something, but isn't for that kind of festival with that kind of agenda as Manifesta is at least presenting themselves, isn't that what they should do? But the question is what Biennial is representing, because of this 1 year I actually don't know.
Well, let's put it this way. I was in the Industrial Art Biennial, which takes place in Istria, in Croatia. And the locality there took on the shape of, for example, there is a selection of books and a recording of speeches by a notable female, let's call her public personality from the early 20th or late 19th century, which is housed in the museum of the town of Labin. And when I entered the museum and asked the employee for the work, I had to show the guide. The guidebook I had on my phone, and then she said, "Oh, okay, it's those books on the top floor." And then later, when I came down and told her that okay, it actually involves also the fragments of speeches, that she said, "Oh yes, they are probably just in Croatian." So that is the other side of locality, where you have an event that is seemingly from the outset built up in a way that they probably expect that most of the visitors would be local, probably from the Balkans. Where the languages are, well, okay, not mutually understandable, but Serbian and Croatian is, for example. So,
actually, it's the same language.
Sorry?
Actually, it's the same language.
Well, you can actually, yeah.
Different alphabet. Actually, it's
Post-90, it's not.
Okay, you can call it whatever you want, however you want.
Moldovan and Romanian, right? But
there are facts. Yeah.
But that is another way of locality, and in that sense, of course, RIBOCA is aiming for this international image, and also they have translated all the texts into Russian, which even though it's probably something that none of the major public institutions do here, I think it still is a rational and cordial gesture.
It's also very expensive. I don't think that maybe some of the institutions are very consciously excluding Russian language in their projects, but I can immediately say that many times it's just very expensive to translate in 2 or 3 languages, everything.
But as a gesture, I think it's...
So everybody chooses just English because that is just
ordinary rate is £70 British rate, £70 for 1,000 words. It's not a lot,
I suppose
depends on the budget.
Depends on the budget,
but unfortunately the budget is also something it's even a bit kind of embarrassing to talk about.
You can find the cheaper versions,
and then you as an editor sweat dealing with those
well,
kind of
getting the cheap editor and the cheap translator.
Yeah,
actually some of translations are very cheap because they don't have just an official document,
but in any case, I think you could make an argument that there's a social gesture that actually goes quite far, and if, for example, the National Art Museum would go on and do something like that.
They partly are doing that. At least press releases they also translate in Russian. So, which no, that means they are doing a lot. I don't know about. I guess that all those public materials aren't they also in Russian?
Okay, now that
in a permanent exhibition.
Probably I'm not sure about the website, but well, anyway.
Have to revisit. That just means.
But in any case, the locality. I'm not sure if coming from outside, it's so easy to judge about the kind of locality that Yeah. I mean, because the organization that is doing the Biennial in Croatia is a local organization, so I mean, you could sort of imagine them sticking around for another 10 years or until they get married or something.
Yeah,
but
mostly in English and Latvian, just.
But Manifesto would leave Palermo in a couple of months, and I mean,
no. Yes, sure. No, this is one also the big difference, that it's not nomadic, so it isn't like it's arriving here for one time and then it flews away. So the tension, I think, because of that is also, I guess, bigger is just because it is planning to stay. It's just the first edition, and I understand that because of that we kind of, as everything that happens for the first time, it actually is anyway a pilot or experimental version, and in this case actually Katarina Gregos had a huge responsibility as being the first curator, because in a way she built up Biennial, and I don't know how, that's for me the question, because it's not clear what happens when the next curator comes, because I don't know still, after seeing the exhibitions and following up the educational program, I'm still not sure what is the Biennial's identity without Katarina. So, because Katarina will go away, she's not here to stay. She is the nomadic part. She is the one that was only here for once, or at least maybe she will return after 10 years again and create. But for now, she's only this one time, and she will go away. But the Biennial will stay. And then the question is.
But we actually, with that, we arrive also on the, I would say, the last topic that we can cover and that we also wanted to cover is the Biennial itself. As Kirill nicely pointed out, the Biennial is something that you can visit only with your mistress. And, it seems to be also this way, in the sense that when I was just today found on Arts newsletter, they had a nice podcast which also covered the question of Biennial, and they covered it because Jane Morris has written for Art News an article, is the Biennial model busted? So some researchers in Zurich have figured out that there are around 320 biennials in the world, which apparently is a lot. And okay, I can understand that it's a lot, but saying it is a lot, and also reading Jane Morris's article, why it is kind of problem? Why this biennials model busted? Like, what is the biennials model is actually something that they don't define in the article, because I would say a biennial, it means an art festival that takes place every second year. So what? Like, I mean, we have most probably much more than 320 of them, which just don't happen to call themselves biennials. But at the same time, there is an article, and the RIBOCA itself is also constantly referring to this kind of biennialization or whatever. Like, so there is kind of this vague notion of a biennial being something very important. And in the article, they interviewed somebody who is, I think it's somewhere in Vietnam, was doing a biennial, and she was it was the first biennial there, and she was very, like, no, like, how can I do another one? Like, you know, I have maybe 10 years of research has led to this biennial that I'm now doing, like, I cannot make another one. And how can you expect, like, there to be artists who, like, every second year can, like, input significant work? And so there's kind of this, with the name biennial is kind of related, like, connected, this idea that everything is grand and important and so on.
It has become a brand itself.
Yeah, so maybe the grandness should be taken away from the biennial.
Yeah, but have in mind that, you know, how many rock festivals are in the world there?
Yeah, exactly.
That's okay. You know, if any of the bands who participate in these festivals, they have a good album recorded, every 2 years or every year or every 5 years or something like this. No,
but to put things in perspective, I think there are. At least 5 or 6 biennials or similar events going on in the Baltics. I mean, without RIBOCA. And I think part of the word, probably because of Venice, is sort of very inflated, but many of the biennials are really quite modest, and they are literally events that take place once every 2 years, and there's nothing grand or... I mean, you could sort of say that 2 years is a pretty long time, and you sort of expect, or there's some planning needs to be done, but...
come on, if you make a bigger show than 2 years, it's actually even surprised about survival kit in Riga, that it can take place every year, because, you know, before the previous one has ended, you have to already work on the next one. So it's kind of...
and the biggest part is like in summer. I worked 2 years as editor of the catalog, and it said no more summers.
No more summers.
No more summers taken away from me. You know? But this will be their last. The 10's kind of the magical number, round number 10 is their last. No, let's say now they in a spring again will have, but then I guess they will. I don't know if they're just going to the spring or they will also make the Biennial kind of version. It won't be every year anymore. Oh my God!
Okay, no, we can leave that.
That is open question.
But
by the way, I have sorry for interrupting you. I have a modest proposal for the organizers of the future biennales in Riga and so on, to try to to be different from other biennales and to maintain the identity of the region and whatnot and so on. I think it could be very useful to rename Biennale to Biennial, BM, Baltic Melancholy. And that would be, it's 100% local identity. Everyone recognizes from the very first sight, the very first sight, it's not Biennale, it's Biennial. It's something new, and a lot of companies and businesses who specialized in Xanax, for instance, and so on, could invest into this Biennale. You'll be just swimming in money, next year if you, they, not you, but they, and so just bathing there. What?
No, I see your point, and all this. I think in where's in Kuldiga, there's this bomb shelter. Well, like not even bomb shelter, but this Soviet time built shelter that is kind of a tourist attraction. And there are some. I think there's even a hotel somewhere in Latvia where you can stay in the.
Liepaja, I think.
It might be. So you can stay in the prison, sleeping on the floor.
No, it's not. Melancholy. It's a very
no, but this is nostalgia. People love it. It's kind of.
But there are, I'm very sorry, but nostalgia and melancholy are two different things. Okay. Nostalgia is it's a state of mind when you are just longing for the past and you try to reconstruct it. Mm-hmm. And this is the main point of nostalgia. Nostalgia is a reconstruction, physical or just spiritual or whatever and so on. Melancholy, that it's all over. It's all over. It will never return. The past, whatnot and so on. But you are in the perfect state of melancholy. You are longing for something which doesn't exist no more and will never exist. And that is different, from the Soviet nostalgia of this, prison hotels and so on. It's different, it's a very sophisticated thing, and a lot of modern culture, I'm not joking, is based on melancholy. For instance, all this stuff about hauntology in music, in art now and whatnot and so on, it's all about this. It's longing, it's missing the future which never happened. Former future, I mean.
Although, if we look at the history of melancholia, its fortunes have been shifting. Which time was it? Romanticism, when they started associating melancholia with geniuses and all that thing. But before
mostly,
that, it was
mostly. But Burton's Anatomy of Melancholy also, just hinted that there is a sort of...
But before that, melancholy was actually the old word for depression.
Yeah.
It's still, we still actually don't know, because there are links, but, I think they separate from each other, in a bit.
But I personally certainly wouldn't want to come from a country which is associated with melancholy biennial. I'm sort of trying to think about myself and also the country itself as a vehicle for future or something like that. And even though, of course, building democratic institutions is out of fashion now, I think we still have some work to do. And I would sort of also appreciate a biennial that sort of does something along those lines.
No, actually, even see where Kirill's comment comes from. I kind of felt that I, as a critic, might be in the, maybe I would write better recensions about
Biennial.
Biennial. Biennial. But that was the last point because the Katarina Gregos's release of this time's RIBOCA, and we don't know which will be the next one. So Gregos included a lot of local artists. Like there are many Latvians, there are many Estonians, there are a few Lithuanians.
Only few. I don't know why.
But how do they represent themselves? So like I am kind of intrigued about this question about the locality and kind of internationalism or something like because when we talk about biennials, then there is also, even though you say contemporary art doesn't have any aesthetics, then there is an aesthetics of biennials. How does your work have to look like to be at the biennial? And I would say there is a particular characteristics, even though I cannot ad hoc start to kind of describe it. I could just mention the elements of how something has to be put out, because I've worked with that. But anyway, I was kind of, because at first glance I was thinking like, I think I can be proud about like the Estonian artists. They look like totally like international artists. so I was kind of wondering whether I should be happy or sad about that, or is there any point in talking about locality in this sense? Because we now with Manifesta in connection talked a lot about locality. So is it kind of something that can be cherished, or is it better when we kind of this Biennale thing don't do?
But with Manifesta, this is the things that we kind of more and more are touching is what is RIBOCA's identity, because with Manifesta they have announced now they're kind of a bit kind of turned focus, so that they are going now much more on urbanism as both as a topic and both as the manner in which they will work. So, and also now instead of curators, they actually took 5 people, of which one was curator, or contemporary art curator, but there was architects and environmentalists and designers who was in this group of people, work group who then worked on this year's Manifesta, and their focus is very much kind of focused now more towards urbanism, but of course collaborating with the artists, and they are doing the research and etc. and so, but where
it's interesting that such things talking about the urbanism and so on as a sort of main social idea, not aesthetic idea, but it's a social idea and cultural idea of urban, of city, of town, and so on. It's actually it's very popular now in this suspicious Russia and so on. I just returned from Nizhny Novgorod, and they have a sort of exhibition in the Center for Contemporary Art, Arsenal, which is dedicated. Its title is Gorky. Modernism. Gorky, it's a pen name of the writer, but actually it's a former name of the city and so on. Mm-hmm. It's modernism. It's playing both sides, with modernism as a sort of, in art and so on, but at the same time it's a second wave of industrialization, Soviet industrialization in 50s and 60s. And it's all about urban stuff and so on. And they speak about art and so on just in the second step of this, ladder of understanding, of this period and so on. So I think it's just a common idea of including art in the wider, not context, but in the wider concept of understanding society. That's why I'm, speaking seriously. That's why I'm speaking about that. Contemporary art is not about, the artistic perception and so on. It's all about a sort of social gesture, it's sort of social activity and so on.
But it automatically includes a kind of subjective or also perception.
Of course, as I told you, as a side effect.
Yeah.
There's a side effect, of course.
And also the beauty. Some manifest works were actually beautiful.
So everyone wants to produce nice things. Yeah, that's.
Or the environment was beautiful. Botanic garden was fantastic.
Yeah, what not, and so on. So it's just it's an honorable European tradition or Western tradition. Why not to go on with this?
Actually, so in this kind of context of the beauty and also maybe this. Also melancholy and also actually nostalgia. It's interesting what we now with Indrek was listening to this
art. Just a moment. Scroll
Sorry.
down.
I
The
forgot.
art newsletter.
The art newsletter, and they also interviewed on the phone Liverpool Biennial curator, as I understood correctly, yeah. And if I wrote down correctly, the title of this year's Biennial, it's "Beautiful World, Where Are You?"
It's a typical Brexit idea of, where everyone is scared to death, and, we try to find something beautiful now, in Britain, in Liverpool, which is very hard, I have to say.
They kind of are trying to kind of explain that it's about the world in large.
Oh,
and
you
so
don't have faith that the social projects in Tokstad will bring any results or something?
Well, of course, it can, bring results, but, it depends of, in terms of urbanism and... Okay, let's stop it here, yeah.
So, but does okay, because the question about Baltic artists participating in RIBOCA stayed kind of in the air. Then, for the final notes, do their colleagues want to add something about that? Not really.
Let's put it this way, from a local perspective, well, traveling around quite a bit, I felt reasonably reassured recognizing many of the foreign artists or even some of the works which I've seen in cities as diverse as Turku or Utrecht. So I mean, yeah, from a fairly local perspective, the local artists' works and this, not exactly how are my guys doing thing, but I think
this moment.
probably is the most interesting part of the Biennial for me. For that part, I think I've also say that the Marburg's residence is more interesting for me personally than the Faculty of Biology or the other venues. But I cannot help thinking if that is some sort of very local, specialized interest that would simply just pass by anyone who visits from abroad and doesn't really... for whom it makes no difference whether this artist has done that before or not, and so in that sense, I'm sort of still trying to compare experience going to a Biennial in Riga with going to Biennials anywhere.
And actually, Malberg residency is also the most symbolic space because it used to be one of his several apartments in Riga and houses, and which all is now it was kind of heritated officially by Latvian University, and they don't have capacity to actually.
Is the place with the first shower in Latvia?
Yeah.
Oh, but there's also another...
That is progress.
There's another symbolic thing. I mean, as I understand, he was some sort of a capitalist who donated his cultural capital to the university. So I suppose there is...
And he also was doing those stipendiums for the students, especially who came to Riga from the countryside. And
so I suppose with a distance of about a century, we can look at private capital and initiative as something good, as having contributed to society.
It's a very melancholic conversation, by the way. That was very good, 1 century ago. Even fat cats, they were, okay, related, they had a heart and so on. So you see that the idea of Biennale is just.
So we have, at least our talk has created this kind of, maybe not necessarily positive program, but at least a program which is already kind of, can be perceived as progress.
Just one point more, I'm not joking, it's very serious. Speaking about local identity of the future, series of events like this and so on, it depends on how you define the word local. You can define local as Latvian. You can define local as Baltic states in Russian, Pribaltica, so-called, a bit of derogatory term. Sort of post-Soviet Baltic states, or republics. Or you can define local as a Central Europe, or even Eastern Europe, or East Europe, yeah? Or you can define it as a part of a region which is North Europe or Scandinavian and so on. That is the real choice. That is actually the real choice. If you still, not you of course, but just rhetoric, yeah? Rhetoric. If you still define yourself as a sort of, I am first post-Soviet, secondly Baltic, thirdly, Eastern European or, Central European and so on, it doesn't work. But if you just change the focus of your self-identification, a sort of, I think it would be very fruitful to move this focus on North and to try to understand, this region and Riga and local artistic scene and so on as a sort of southern border of northern region, not a northern border of the, eastern region or, whatnot and so on. That would be the real change.
In that sense, of course, you could take it a bit further and take, I suppose there would be no political problems with a biennial being globalist, Western liberal something, as opposed to, a biennial in Sharjah, which would be fairly aesthetic and perhaps do something about nature but never criticize the government. So, that's also a choice that you can make.
But with this, what was this, the southern border of northern, even just to give credit to Photomonth, it has been actually even it has been tried, let's say, but maybe not hard enough.
Yes, but we have to
try harder.
Yes. Fail. Do you know this Samuel Beckett's phrase? Fail better.
Okay, so let's round it up with this here. Thank you. We had Valts Miķelsons in studio, Kirill Kobrin, and Šelda Puķīte. And I was Indrek Grigor. So thank you for listening to God's Ear. Till soon.